Hey guys, and welcome to this edition of Scruff's Garage. Today I've got something I'm really excited to add to my personal garage. Something I wanted for a long time. I just couldn't justify it in the past, but I finally broke down and bought one. And that, of course, as you see, is a QuickJack lift. I've done all my work in the garage with floor jacks and jack stands, and getting underneath the Corvette is always a challenge. So this would make life much simpler. I would have killed to have had this back when I was pulling the motor and the torque tube and all that stuff out of the Corvette. Normally, this unit runs like $1,400 or something. But lo and behold, a couple of months ago, Costco of all places put it on sale, and they only had the 5,000-pound standard length version, but it was like $900, of course, plus tax or whatever. But it was such a substantial discount. I finally found a way to justify it to myself, and I bought it. 5,000 pounds, standard length with the 110 outlet. I think it's going to work best for me. And then the power unit comes in three different versions. I got the 110 volt, which is pretty much your standard wall outlet, at least in the US, for your garage or something. And I was looking at the motor. It's rated for 6.4 amps. And typically most circuits in your garage are going to be a 15 amp. You might have a 20 amp circuit, but most will probably be a 15 amp circuit. So as long as you're not running a bunch of other items at the same time that you're trying to lift the vehicle, you won't have any problems tripping breakers or that sort of thing. So I'll show you how I'm going to set up the hoses and that sort of thing. I'm not going to belabor that. It's relatively straightforward, but it is nice to see how it all goes together so you can plan ahead. Okay, so I'll give you a brief rundown of what you get in the box so that you can prepare to set up your QuickJack if you get one. The first thing I'll comment on is that they give you a very nice printed and bound owner's manual setup guide. It's got nice pictures, diagrams. It's very well done. So often you buy things and it's just some like rough photocopied, poorly translated instruction manual. But this is actually a very nice guide. And then QuickJack as well has a YouTube channel. I recommend going over there and watching their setup video as well. I'm sure you'll find that helpful. I watched it several times myself. You get a tray of fittings, 2 short hoses, and then 2 long hoses. As a quick rundown, and they also give you some nice Teflon tape. So these 2 fittings, these 2 angle fittings, will go in the hydraulic cylinders on the frames themselves. So the side with the rubber O-ring, if you can see that, goes into to the unit. Then this side of the fitting, this end of the hose will connect to. The little rubber cap screws out. And so you have the hydraulic unit to this, with the cylinder to this to that. At the end, at this end, you'll have this fitting. So it's a female threaded, male hydraulic side that will go. These 2 go on the short hose. That will connect. Then you have these 4 connections. They go on your long hoses, and the fittings at both ends are the same. So that's why you have 4 of these. So these are a female threaded side and a female hydraulic side, like I said, and that will be the same at both ends of your long hoses. So that's what those 4 are for. Then you have these 2. These are a male threaded with the O-ring, and then a male hydraulic side. And these will go into the side of the power unit, the big hydraulic unit that pushes pressure to the frames. So that's how these things get set up. It's pretty straightforward once you understand it. So what I'm going to do first is set up my hoses. That way I've got my fittings all connected, and then we'll move over to the frames themselves. There are a couple of steps over there. We'll get these installed, pressurize the air cylinders as well. We'll start working our way through it. Okay, I'm going to start by setting up my short hoses first. And I'll just mention, in the front of the manual, they tell you a bunch of different size open end wrenches that you should have out. Like none of those were what actually matched the fittings that I have in the box. So this is a 7/8, and it fits the large hex on all of these fittings. Then there's a 17 millimeter that fits the hex on all of the hoses, both the short and the long. And then this is an 11/16. It fits the hex on this elbow fitting that will go on the frames. So I don't know why they mix metric and SAE, but whatever. So, and then of course, on your fittings that don't have the O-ring, you want to make sure you use the included Teflon, and always wrap the Teflon in the direction that you're going to thread into the mating part. That way, as you tighten it, you're not unraveling your Teflon. Okay, there you go. They should be snug, but don't go crazy. They reference some torque specs in the manual. They're all fairly low, typically 10 to 12 foot-pounds, so there's no easy way of checking and confirming that, but just don't go nuts. You don't have to crank it down. The Teflon will handle the seal. Okay, so while we're getting things set up over here on the workbench, we'll install our two last hydraulic fittings. These go in the power unit itself. These two red shipping caps come out, and then these two will thread in. Of course, these have the rubber O-ring, so no Teflon needed. Okay, and then the last step with the power unit while we're getting it set up is to fill the reservoir tank with transmission fluid. And QuickJack lists 2 or 3 different types of hydraulic fluid that you can use. You can use actual hydraulic fluid, or pretty much any type of automatic transmission fluid will serve as a hydraulic fluid as well. To get the fill cap off, it's a 15/16. So yet another size that you may need. Of course, an adjustable wrench would work as well. And then you'll need a funnel. Make sure it's clean, that way you don't get any debris down into the reservoir tank. And then they take 2.1 quarts, or fill it to, I think it says like a 1/2 inch below the top. So we'll start with 2 quarts and then see where that puts us. Yeah, tell you what, at the moment that's 2 quarts. That's pretty much, I'm going to guess 1/2 inch below the fill point. So I'm going to leave that like it is for the moment. After we finish the setup procedure, obviously the lines would take some fluid, the cylinders would take some fluid, and so we'll probably top it off again after we purge the system. But for the moment, that will work for what we need to do. And then, of course, according to the manual, there's a couple of different types of vent caps with these. So this has the vent cap that you have to open. Some are self-venting, but anytime you run the unit, the vent cap needs to be loosened so that pressure can vent in and out of the reservoir. And then when you're finished, close up the vent cap so the moisture and that sort of thing doesn't get into your fluid. Okay, so we're over here at the frames themselves. Obviously there's the front, there's a little air cylinder, and then this is the hydraulic ram. At the end of the hydraulic ram, this is where this fitting goes. There's a shipping, just a plug that's in there. To get that out, it's a quarter hex. Just loosen that and take the plug out. One issue I had with the frames just bottomed out resting, as you try to install this, when it got, let me show you, right there, the tip of the fitting hit this gusset here in the corner. So I lifted this and I put one of the included rubber blocks under it, and you can see it helps extend the ram just a pinch, and it gave me just enough clearance now that I think I can tighten this fitting. Okay, so you'll feel the fitting kind of bottom out in there, get it kind of where you want it. You do want it angled upward just a bit, and then you tighten the nut. To keep the fitting from moving, you may, it's a 9/16 to help hold the fitting in place. Okay, so that's good and tight. And then when you're using this, the lines actually route under the frame. They'll talk about that quite a bit. Well, yeah, run it under. Otherwise, if you have it up here, it's going to be in the way when you're trying to lift the vehicle. Okay, the next step. So there's this little air cylinder on the side of the hydraulic ram. We need to put between 40 and 50 psi of air pressure in this. So the instructions say there's a little valve stem cap. You can press it in, or you can loosen it with the Schrader valve tool. Let out any air that's in there now. This one actually had a fair amount. The other one just had a puff of air in it. Okay. And then I've got like a little small air tank here, and this little cylinder is tiny. It only takes just a touch of air to get it pressurized. Then I've got a there we go, and that's all it takes. So I set mine at 45 psi right there in the middle, and then put the cap back on. Okay, and that procedure is done. Of course, you got to do it for the other frame as well. Okay, so now we're ready to go through the bleeding procedure. We've got all of our lines connected, right? So we got our fittings, short line. They come down here, they connect to the long hoses, and then to the hydraulic power unit itself. And then of course, make sure you got power to it. We've got fluid in the reservoir. So now we're going to do a bleed procedure. They recommend jacking up the back end. So your bleed valve is here at the back of the hydraulic cylinder. So we want that elevated so that any air in the system rises to this point, and then we can bleed it off. So we've got everything connected. We'll cycle the lift and run it 2 or 3 times to just below the first lifting point. Don't go all the way up with it yet. You can get it stuck if you try to take it all the way up. But we're just going to cycle it a few times. This is going to push fluid from the reservoir, obviously, excuse me, through all the lines and into the hydraulic cylinder. So there'll be some air in the system, and it will go probably erratically a little bit at first, but then we'll smooth out. Okay, and then like I said, this is a 4.5 millimeter hex. We'll crack open the bleed valve. There we go, and you may have heard it purge some air that was trapped in the system. We'll close it. Okay, so with the bleeder screw closed, so right, I bled both of them. With it closed, we're going to go up for just a couple of seconds. There we go. Then we're going to crack the bleed valve one more time just to make sure there's no air trapped in there. Nope, still got a little bit. Yeah, still had some air in that one. I'm going to do the other side now. Okay, so I went through the bleed procedure probably 6, 7, 8 more times. Every time I would cycle it, bring it down, crack open the bleed valve, I kept getting just a little bit of air coming out, actually of both cylinders. So I just kept doing that until finally I could crack it open and no air came out. So I think probably at the moment I've got it pretty good at the moment. Though obviously as I go up and down on the vehicle from time to time, it might be good to come back and go through the bleed procedure again. Obviously a hydraulic system doesn't like air trapped in it. Could cause it to go up and down unevenly. So we've got everything connected. Obviously I also went back and topped off the fluid in the reservoir. Obviously as it filled up all the lines, brings the fluid level down just a little bit. So it only took a few more ounces, but I got it back to that 1/2 inch below the fill point, so that seems to be good. Of course, check all of your lines. I see one line that I may need to tighten just a little bit, but look for any hydraulic fluid coming out. You may need to tighten or reapply some Teflon. Make sure you don't have any leaks anywhere in the system. Going through that now will save you some time later. Once you've got all that straightened out, we'd be ready for our maiden voyage on the vehicle. Okay, here we go. We're ready to make the first lift with it. I'll bump it up so that the blocks make contact with the jacking pucks, just to make sure everything is lined up properly, and then we'll do our first lift. Okay, all my lifting points look good, so I'll lower it, and then we'll lift it all the way up. Okay, so initially I've just jacked it up to the first stop points on the jacks. I'll kind of check everything out, make sure everything still looks good, and then we can go up more if we'd like to. Okay, and before I get the vehicle all the way up, while it's still on the first lock, I am going to give it a light shake test. I'm not going to go crazy, but just for my own peace of mind before I put myself under there. Yeah, so that's pretty solid. So I'll keep going up with it. Okay, so that's in the full lift position. You can see how much clearance you get under the vehicle. Would certainly be more than enough to rotate tires. Well, obviously you're probably not going to rotate them on a Corvette unless you get a square setup. But taking the tires off to do a brake job, plenty of room to get under there. And of course, while you have it up the first time, inspect all your fittings. Make sure you don't have any leaks, anything that's going to cause you problems. Now would be the time to check it out, and you can adjust it, correct anything if you need to. Okay, and then to lower it, obviously right now we've got it set down on the lock, so this supports the vehicle. There's no hydraulic pressure at the moment. To lower the vehicle, we'll go up just enough that we can flip this cam lock over, and then that will allow the rail to pass by the stops on the way down. Okay, we flip both sides, and now we can go down. And I'll stop it there, make sure I don't have anything in the way. And hold the button for just a few seconds, make sure all the pressure's off. And we're all the way down. So yeah, first lift, complete success. Okay, so first impressions. Overall setup, I'd say it's really easy. It's honestly just a few fittings with some Teflon tape. Spent more time setting up the camera so that I could film it than it really did to make all those connections. So setup is really easy. Took a few more tries to get all the air bled out of it, but honestly I only did it maybe 6 or 7 times, and then it finally got the air purged out of the system. So again, no big deal there. Going up and down, it's actually quieter than I thought it might be, so it doesn't wake the neighbors. Like I said, I'm in a townhouse, so I didn't want anything super loud, but it's actually pretty smooth and quiet. And the lifting speed I'm pretty impressed with. Obviously the Corvette's not crazy heavy. It's a 5,000 pound lift, and the car is probably 3,200 pounds, give or take. But it goes from all the way down to all the way up. You saw it pretty quick. The one drawback I'll say, the single biggest drawback, is how heavy they are. Yes, they are portable, but each of these rails weighs about 75 pounds. They're on wheels at the back, but they're still very long and awkward. So moving them around the garage, especially in tight spaces. I don't have a particularly deep garage, so getting them past the front or back of the car, you got to be very careful with it. So I can see that being kind of a pain, but it's a trade-off. Dragging floor jacks and jack stands around is a pain as well. I'm very happy with how high it lifts the vehicle. Safety and stability, it seems very stable. As or more stable than 4 jack stands would be, and depending on the type of work you may be doing, if you're banging or pushing on the car, you may still choose to add a jack stand at the front and the rear, just in case, to keep the car from tipping if something crazy happened. Little extra safety certainly never hurt, but I think you'll certainly be fine with just the QuickJacks. Yeah, so overall, I think for the money that I spent, and especially getting them on sale, I'm very happy with the purchase, and I anticipate getting a lot of usage out of them. So, if you got any questions about how well they fit under the Corvette, if you have any measurement questions, setup questions, or just QuickJack usage questions in general, feel free to hit me up in the comments. I'll be happy to answer anything that I can. Obviously, if you found this content interesting or helpful or useful in any way, I really appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe button. It helps me in the channel, and it helps other people find this content that it might be useful for them as well. So as always, thank you for tuning in to Scruff's Garage. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.